Horses need horses. They are wired for connection, just like us. I do still want to believe that people are good at their core, and I do want to believe that they don't do these sort of things on purpose.
This episode is brought to you by the Horse Trust and Westgate Labs.
Hello, happy Wednesday.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm going to give my update first because once you hear what Miri says, everything else will fall out of your head because she has a really exciting update. So I'm just going to get in there first, give my little update, and then we shall spend some time talking about your very exciting thing. So Harley and I have been on our cross-country sort of training adventure. Very exciting. Yeah. And actually we have Mandy coming out, which is cool. So follow on from last week. And on Saturday, I took him to Pycombe cross-country arena eventing schooling for the first time ever on my own. I've only ever jumped once without a coach away from home, and this was the second time ever. And I was so proud of myself, and I felt so good about how he felt because I'd spoken to Hannah, my coach, before, and we knew that there was going to be a BS show at that venue on the same day, so tannoy and lots of horses and things. And she was like, you know, it might be too much for him at the moment, and that's okay. She was like, go, walk around, check in, see how he feels on the ground, then see how he feels in the saddle, you know, just walking, and kind of just build gently from there. And if she said, if all you do is walk around for an hour, big tick in the box. So I went in with a very, like, chilled mentality. I walked around and he was just, like, so relaxed. And I was like, this is so lovely. Popped into trot, asked for it, and he was great. And so I asked for a bit of bend, he was great. And I was like, oh my God, okay. So I popped into canter, it was so chilled. And, like, all these jumps are everywhere. And, like, bear in mind that when I went to Hickstead last year, I didn't even want to canter on the flat in the cross-country arena because I was like, I don't want to, he'll spook at everything, blah, blah, blah. So this was massive, and we did all these lovely things. We introduced him to the jumps, and to your point, his head went right down like a little truffle pig. And he really processed every time I gave him the opportunity. He was like, thank you so much. He's like sniffing all over it, and then he jumped everything first time. Absolutely everything. Like, not even, to me, didn't even feel hesitant at all. It was wonderful.
So cool.
Yeah, it was great. And at the end, I ended up jumping like an 80 centimetre house. And height isn't everything, but it is certainly a psychological level for me. And the fact that I was like, we're going to end on this and it's going to be great, and he felt so great, I was just over the moon. And there's a YouTube video of that as well. So if you want to come along for the ride and see what I did, you can watch it. But yeah, it was great.
I can't wait. I loved your last YouTube video. I think YouTube videos are I know, obviously, both of us have previously done YouTube very consistently, and YouTube is a labour of love, but I do think there is something about long format horse content that can't be beaten in that way. Oh, that's so good to hear. I love that description of the way he was looking, you know. I think that will hopefully resonate with a lot of people, that analogy I gave of like, well, not analogy, but like the explanation I gave of like, if they're spooking, they often will look down, want to explore it, but if they're like uncertain or not feeling good, then the neck comes up. And I do think these sort of ways of noticing our horse's behaviour are really powerful. And I'm really proud of you, Rhi. You're doing such a wonderful job with him.
Thank you.
Yay.
I do feel as though he's becoming such a lovely horse, and all the effort and every intentional step we've taken is like reaping its reward now. Like I took him hacking alone the other day and he felt great, and I felt so happy about how happy he felt at the end of that session. Like he's just a really happy horse, and that makes me feel really good.
I love this so much. Do you remember when we were talking about the young horse episode and I spoke about a training ladder?
Yes, every step, and sometimes the step.
Exactly. And we need to sometimes we need to go back a step and re-concrete a step, and that's what you've done. You've just gone, okay, there's some wobbly steps in the hacking on his own, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to instill those in a confident way from the ground, and then get back on board and, oh well, would you look at that, I actually did a thing, I did a training, you know. And the same with the cross country, you slow it down, you speed back up again, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I say it before, you are such a wonderful shining light for hobbyist riders, because it doesn't have to be hard. doesn't have to be unpleasant and scary, and it can actually just be thoughtful, considered, progressive, gentle. All of those words are the words that I would use to describe how you and Harley do stuff. And if I can be a tiny little part of that, just a little moment in your ear to say, how about this? I feel very honoured.
Well, thank you, first of all. And secondly, you are, because one thing that you have massively taught me is I used to believe or used to subscribe to the opinion that you train something, they learn it, you tick it off, that's it. And now I feel much more fluid about things. Like, if something comes up now in my hacking or in my jumping or whatever it is, I don't like go, oh, well, I already taught him that, he should know how to do that and this shouldn't be an issue. I just go, oh, interesting. I wonder where that might have come from. And sometimes you don't know the answer, sometimes you do. I'm just going to take that back a step. Like, it's a constant wave. Like, waves come and go. It's not like a linear process. And I feel much more comfortable with that now than maybe I would have before. And that is because of you.
Oh, well, that's nice. I'm glad.
Yeah. So, on to you, Miri. I had to get in there first today because I feel as though you've got this amazing news, and we've been holding back on it for so long. Everyone thought Miri was pregnant. That was really funny. She's not. But Miri, please, Can you tell us your news? That's a little drum roll.
Oh, I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud. We're moving. I could actually cry saying this. I can't. So we're not just moving the horses, we're moving house, and I will actually get to look out of my window and see my horses out of my window in the not too distant future. And this has been a very long time coming. This project has been manifested over the last 5 years, and I've been recently actually going back through all of the footage that I have filmed over the last, since I went back as far as 2021, I think, on my camera roll, and that was when I started documenting the process. But I won't ruin it. Not ruin it, but I can't give everything away now. But yeah, if you want to subscribe to my YouTube channel, it'd be a great time to do so, because this is a really cool story to tell. And I have a lot of people that have really believed in me and what I do and supported what I do, and this podcast is part of that, and you are part of that, Rhi, and every person that has followed me and enabled what I do with the horses to become what it is now has played a part in this. Because if my business hadn't grown to the size it has grown to, if my name wasn't what my name is, as in I have a good reputation, this wouldn't have been possible. And so I'm just thankful and grateful to every person that has played a small part in this. We're not going very far. We will only be moving just very locally to where we currently are. We will have a big arena, we will have amazing stables, and I'm working with some unbelievable brands. I'm talking Dream can't even fathom that they have considered a partnership brands, and
oh my god, I can just to back you.
Okay, well, thanks, I appreciate you. I think at the time of when I first approached those brands, I was like, surely not.
Yeah. I mean, I got tears in my eyes just then when you were speaking, because I remember when we were talking years ago and you were looking for a yard, and it felt quite, I don't want to say desperate, but it really felt like quite this huge thing, and we were just, I mean, you, not we, I wasn't going through it, but the idea that you were going to have to find a space big enough for you and all the horses and the work you needed to do, it felt a bit like needle in a haystack territory, and I really 100%. Felt for you. And I think what's been so amazing about this place is that it started out as just okay, it ticks the basic boxes, and as time has gone on, you've been able to craft it into something that is really special. And all the stuff that we've talked about and that you preach, you get to craft into like a personalized space. And I don't know, I want to ask you if you can, like, in enough detail that you feel comfortable with, but can you paint us a picture of the space a little bit?
So the house is 600 years old, and the land is previously Roman land, so once upon a time would have had the Romans on it. So it's all very sort of ancient and magical in that way. It's like a farmyard surrounded by 3 big fields, and within the farmyard we've got like a big barn where we're going to have internal stables that will all be encouraging like a community of horses. So, you know, there's a lot of things that I learned now about horses and herd dynamics, and my horses live in small groups. That's how we have found works best, because you guys have got to understand, like, I don't get the horses that just want to be friends with everyone. I get the horses that have had a really hard time, and sometimes that means that actually just throwing them all in a big group together wouldn't actually be a reality, because some of those horses stay with me long term, but some of them don't. And those ones that don't, it would be very difficult to integrate them, because sometimes I'm talking 6 months it can take to integrate a horse, because it has had such a peculiar time prior to the time it spends with us. So for me, I do need to have stables, and that there'll be some people out there. An interesting conversation we'll have today with Steffi. She's been somebody who has really supported me, because I've had my doubts and I've thought, oh God, you know, do I just want to have horses that live in the field, and is that the only thing that I can handle, or is that the only thing that would work? And actually the reality is I need to find an environment where I can have stables for the horses for when they need them, that enable them to still co-regulate, which is what horses do in a herd. And yeah, I won't expose the brands that I'm going to be working with yet, but you'll have to, like I say, follow YouTube, and things will be coming up on Instagram in the coming months now too, where I start sort of explaining about all of the cool things that we're going to be doing.
Yeah, it's very cool. And I think you've really lived the podcast brand in a way of, like, nothing is purist, but everything is thoughtful and forward thinking and done with curiosity, and like, how can I make this 10, 20, 30% better? And that's very cool. So yeah, very exciting, and a really beautiful actually maybe segue into today's conversation, because you brought on this guest for this conversation, so why don't you give us a little intro into her?
So Steffi is her brand is called Science for Soundness, and I won't kind of explain too much about her, what she does, but she really has a focus on the power of regulation with horses, and how when we are regulated and they are regulated, that there's this beautiful healing. And she calls it the science for soundness. So there's like many pillars to what makes a horse sound. Now I did some air quotes when I said sound, and she doesn't just mean physically can trot in a straight line without hopping lame. She means, you know, like a whole embodiment of soundness, every part, nervous system regulation and physical body and emotional state, all of those different things. So recently I was having a panic about the volume of grazing that we have when we move. It's not divided up in any way, and we're moving from a yard where I don't have any control over our grazing. And they're just huge. There's quite a few just very big fields. Well, not very many actually, very big fields. And so it's made the turnout situation really difficult. And I was like freaking out about it. And Steffi has a paddock paradise at her facility, where the horses have space to rest and loaf together, much like the equicentral system. And then they have a track as well. And I'm super interested to speak to Steffi about this, because we've wanted to talk to somebody about track systems. We've wanted to find the right person, because it's a complicated topic that seems to get people very hot under the collar, you could say.
Yeah.
And Steffi was just so kind to me in that moment, and I look forward actually to having this space to talk about this, because this is absolutely terrifying. Like, it is my dream. It has been my dream for however long, to have a facility that facilitates all of the things that I want to be able to do, to coach and to teach and to guide and to give space for healing and learning and the joy that is horses and what that brings. But also, this is going to change my life, my partner and ours lives. You know, we work incredibly hard, both of us, and we live in a house that's fairly small, and we've kind of been waiting for such a long time for this shift in our lives that it's kind of felt like life has been on hold. And I think, I don't know, I've kind of gone a bit off track, but this isn't like an easy thing. It's not, that's what I was saying. I was this is really hard, all of it as well. It's like this beautiful gift with lots of complicated elements to it. So being able to have this space with you all, our wonderful listeners, feels, well, like something that I'll be very grateful for through the process as well, because I don't know what I'm doing, a lot of it. I've never done this. I've never built a yard.
And I'm sure that we'll have conversations about it ongoing, about how you're doing that. And I know that having seen some of the footage, it will be very insightful to show people what that looks like from the ground up. So yeah, really exciting.
Yeah, and you know, one thing I want to say to kind of round off before we invite Steffi on is, like, I want this project to not only be amazing for me, selfishly, but I want this to show people what is possible for horses, that there is a way that you can keep horses that is with their, you know, needs in mind, while still having a kind of traditional, I did some air quotes again, setup where maybe, you know, professional riders that would like to keep their horses in a more natural way, they would like to be able to turn them out more, they would like to be able to have their stables less like a shoebox with tall walls with no interaction. You know, I think there are people out there doing it now that are keeping horses in these different ways, and I really look forward to being a pioneer in this space, you know, and I'm so excited to take you all on the journey. So yeah, happy days.
This November, the Horse Trust has launched phase 2 of their Home for More Horses appeal, and honestly, it's already a success story. Last year, listeners and supporters like you helped to raise over £64,000 to build new fields for retired and hard-working service horses. And here's the thing, it worked. This year alone, those fields provided over 3,400 respite days for police and cavalry horses who desperately needed a break. Now they're asking for help to finish the job. They need to raise the final $64,000 to add fencing, shelters and water troughs so that even more horses can rest, roam and recover properly. We're talking about giving horses like the Met Police and the household cavalry horses the kind of retirement they've earned. If you'd like to help, search A Home for More Horses on the horsetrust.org.uk website. Just £22 buys a metre of fencing and brings them one step closer to completing this incredible sanctuary. Every pound, every metre makes a real difference. Back to the podcast.
Without further ado, let's welcome Steffi to the podcast. Welcome, Steffi, to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on this gloomy afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. Super excited.
Steffi, can you start by telling us a bit about yourself, what you do, what is important to you, and anything really that you feel we should know about you to get us started?
Oof. Okay, where to start, I think. What's important to me, I suppose, Science for Soundness is what I do, is what I live, and also what's important to me, and that encompasses really everything that's to do with equine welfare in all the ways. So I'm an equine scientist. I studied equine science for my undergrad and my postgrad in the UK, actually. So that's where I came from initially, and then I kind of topped that up with becoming an ESMT because I wanted to help horses physically, and I realized that it's not enough to just know about things. You have to take it to the horse and let the horse respond to it. That's kind of how the equine massage therapy came into play. But then I realized that is not enough to just help the horse. You have to get the owner on board, because if you don't have the owner on board, and by that I don't mean telling them what to do and what not to do, I mean actual education and telling them about how that affects their horse if they ride a certain way, or if their horse is stabled a certain way, what that does to their body and also to their spirit, all of these things and how they interconnect. That's really where I came from. And it all started to unravel really when I had a little Exmoor pony who joined me in the UK. When I brought my horse from Germany over, she needed a companion, and I found this little Exmoor mare, and she was completely traumatized, I would say, by people. And you could just tell that humans weren't really her best friends, and she'd experienced 7 homes in 7 years, and it was just one of those stories that really broke your heart. And over time, I realized that B needed to just be allowed to settle and to gain trust again, and to do, all the things that we often don't have time for. To give a horse actual time to settle is a luxury, and I realized that. But so many people want to be able to do that and want to know how to do that. So that's kind of how it started. And actually, in that paddock paradise, that first paddock paradise I had in Cambridge, I started Science for Soundness because I wanted to bring in all of these holistic aspects into horsemanship. So that's why I call it holistic horsemanship. And it's evolved ever since. It's become an online platform. It's become a concept of the 6 Pillars of Soundness that I teach. And it's just become a really wholesome, holistic way to help horses and also their people, because I feel that if we get to connect with another being, we also can connect with ourselves better and more deeply. So that's that.
There's so many questions in my head already because you touched on so many cool things. I love the language around the holistic piece of it. I love the language around the paddock paradise, which we touched on in our intro. Maybe we start with the Pillars of Soundness that you spoke about. Could you take us through what that looks like?
Sure. So I call it the 6 Pillars of Soundness, and I want to start with saying normally people would think of soundness in the UK, I think, or in English-speaking countries, soundness is a term that we know well from the horse world. But over here, where I live in Germany, or anywhere else I've been, really, people don't understand what that means. And usually when we think of soundness, we think about their body. We think about a horse not being lame. We think about, not any physical ailments, basically. And with B, back in that paddock paradise, I realized that's not enough. You need to be able to take all the other aspects into consideration and giving them a language, giving them a framework that people can actually work with. And that's how the 6 Pillars of Soundness came about, really. So the first pillar is physical, which makes complete sense. Everybody understands that one. The second one is emotional. I mean, it doesn't matter in which order, really, but the second one is emotional, because we do need to take our horses' emotions into play if we want to reach them, if we want to connect with them, even work with them, and understand that if a horse is super stressed out of their mind, they cannot actually learn and think in that moment. So to find a connection on that emotional level, to have them sound emotionally, will eventually also help the training. Then there is the spiritual soundness, which people probably think I'm a little bit woo-woo, and yes, it's Science for Soundness, but also I'm a very spiritual person. And I do believe that every being has a spirit in some way. And even if you can't relate to that aspect, you could also think of it just as being connected to yourself, being connected to the environment that you live in, and just be present in that sense, Feel yourself in that. Yeah, I think that is the spiritual part for me. Then we have mental soundness. Again, if a horse doesn't have the ability to think and learn in a healthy way, then it's going to deprive them eventually. They need to be able to think and solve problems and puzzles and be given the chance to actually have the time to do that and to figure things out and be challenged in a healthy way. But again, it's got to be a healthy way, not overwhelm horses. So I think now we have 4. And then the 5th one is social soundness. I think so often that one is really underestimated. You need a healthy herd. And even if your horse is stabled, I know many horses that are stabled that still get to be turned out with other horses. And horses need horses. They are wired for connection, just like us. They need others in order to regulate, in order to feel safe, in order to express and explore, and just be in a healthy herd setting, really. And you can do so much damage by A, not allowing them that, and B, putting them in the wrong setting. So, that soundness really plays into all of it. And then the final one, and I think that's the sort of container that holds everything, that is environmental soundness, because you do need an environment that supports all of the above, or before said in this case. You need an environment that supports your horse holistically. And if you don't get that right, and that can look so different for every horse. Not every horse is happy in a setting that I have. Not every horse would be happy in a stable. Not every horse is happy with a big herd, and not every horse is happy in a small herd. So you really need to look at the individual and look at their personality and then find that balance. And really, I feel like for me that's always a balance that wants to be found. But those are the 6 pillars, roughly.
Well, I guess it's really interesting I'm a strategist in my corporate life, so I love a framework. And I guess I've never heard it spoken about in that way before. When we think about soundness, we think about, like you said, is a horse lame or not? But actually, I think we all fundamentally know, especially listeners of this podcast, that environment, socialization, the ability mentally to approach something without fear or the wrong kind of pressure is all really important. So I think it's really interesting to consider all of these elements of soundness. Do you have either a way that you approach with owners, like when they first come to you to help? Do you help owners assess the 6 pillars of soundness, or how do you actually take that framework and work with horses and riders on a day-to-day? Is there a priority pillar? How does it work?
Such a good question. I think it's really individual, and it really depends on, I always say context matters, and the context in which I meet horse and human really matters in that case too. So some people might come to me because they have problems. Most often they have problems, actually. So it's either I don't understand what my horse is doing, or I'm struggling to do this and that. It's less about the refinements of, for example, riding. It's more about the in-between, the unspoken, the unseen almost. And then they have those questions and they get stuck, and then they ask me to come on board. So depending on where I meet horse and human, it could be, for example, that a horse is really struggling in an environment and constantly bolting on the lunge or bolting on the rider. And in the end, it's actually, for me, it always feels like a big puzzle and all these different pieces. And I also like to say to my peeps, I like to say, be the scientist or become the scientist for your own horse, which means ask loads of questions, assess the situation, do experiments, do it again and again and again, and figure out if you change one little thing, what changes. And that will give you so many answers. So for people to put on, I like to say, put on that scientist's hat, then that gives me so many answers already. So depending on that context, so if the horse is, for example, constantly bolting, the actual path to get to the answer looks really different for every horse, but the answer in the end might be they are in a really stressful environment where there are horses coming and going all the time. This individual might be a really sensitive individual, very low stress tolerance, and therefore struggles in this environment where there's constant movement going on. And then they move to a different place, and the horse has a smaller but fixed herd, which is very stable, very in the dynamic, very healthy, and all of a sudden the horse doesn't show this sort of behavior anymore. And I feel like it just gives, depending on the context, gives the owners so much power back, because usually you would get a person, in the traditional sense, you would get a person in and they say, do this more or do that more, or ride less, or it's always the horse has to be fixed in some way or another. And I don't look at it like that. I look at the like I say, holistic picture, the whole picture, and I want them to be sound in a whole way. So yeah, it really depends on the context. Sorry, I can't give you a better answer than that.
I think it's so powerful to really for that to be the reminder that, you know, often there is no one size fits all. There is no do this, and then this to get to that place. And I've recently been exploring this kind of side of things more with my online community and talking more about, like, this is so much about awareness, right? It's like, what can you become aware of? What can you notice? I can give you some guides and some prompts, but really, like you say, I love that. Like, we all need to be the scientist for our own horses. I think that's really a really powerful message. Can you tell us a little bit about the environment that your horses live in, your paddock paradise? And because we have some track systems in the UK, and we've talked about the equicentral system, which is where you have loafing areas and then turnout areas. But I would love to hear what a paddock paradise is, and maybe you can talk a bit through how that feeds back to these 6 pillars of Science of Soundness.
Sure. Like you said, my horses live in a paddock paradise. When we first moved here with them, I wanted to recreate what I did in the UK, but I wanted to make it better. And that's the cool thing. You can start with a really cheap and cheerful setup, and that's what I've done back in the day, but then improve on it and see what the horses do with it. And so I really wanted to create something that would keep them moving, that would stimulate their natural senses. So horses naturally want to go in a walk and graze and browse, and they want to have a little nibble here, a little nibble there, and ideally their environment provides everything that they need. So what I've done is, this property has a little foresty bit that was excluded for the horses before, and I've kind of just opened everything up to set up a little track system that also takes them through the forest, takes them through a more like a needle forest, and then also into like a more what's the other word? the not needle trees, the other ones. I lost the word right now, but yeah, it takes them into like different areas basically. Yeah, I should know because I talk about it a lot, but it's just such a classic. The bilingual thing sometimes just crosses, like it cancels each other out. Yeah. But yeah, so the idea is that they get to be encouraged to move, but not move in a sense of, I want you to gallop around all the time, because horses, when we look at them in nature, they don't do that unless they're like super stressed or something just startled them, and then they gallop for like 2 meters and then they stop and they look and assess the situation. So I wanted to create a really peaceful setup, and it turned out really beautifully. It's basically encouraging, so to bring it back to the 6 pillars, or especially the environmental pillar, I suppose, it brings them into the environment and makes them an active part of it rather than just living in it for a little amount of time. It just gives so much feedback. So if you see the horses, for example, going and plucking bramble bushes, then that is something that feeds into their diet, and that tells you what they might need more of right now. Or if they go and pluck the nettles, which is what they've done recently, or even pull out the nettles from the ground, it just tells you so much about what's going on in their systems and what they need. Yes, Miri.
What do brambles mean? Blondie loves brambles. She eats brambles a lot.
I guess it's like, so I'm forgetting my words now. I have a German word in it. Does she eat them a lot?
She always stops. She because we do a lot at Liberty in the arena, she'll take herself off a lot, and she goes and plucks the leaves in the most delicate way. Like, I can't, she's so big. She takes the leaves so delicately.
I love it. What's the word? Is it like, I want to say antioxidant? I think that's what I
get that from the berries, yeah.
Yeah, I want to say that. And I also want to say like a anti-inflammatory almost, depending on, but I'm not sure if it's the brambles or if it's a different one right now.
It's just interesting. Yeah. Maybe I'll do a bit more research into it.
Yeah, do that. I want to say antioxidant. I think that's the word I was thinking of, antioxidant.
And how does your paddock paradise differentiate from a traditional track livery? Because as Miri said, and people in the UK will probably know this, but track systems have a community in the UK that is very passionate, and it can feel very purist. And I remember reading about some where people are like, well, you can't take the horse off the track, so it doesn't suit you if you ride your horse, and stuff like this. And that starts to feel like a very difficult balance between a natural environment for the horse and one that humans can also exist in. So how is your setup different from a traditional track? What makes it a paddock paradise versus a track, for example?
To be honest, I never differentiated so much between them. So this is the first time I hear that you cannot take your horse off the track, and I find that really interesting. I wonder why.
I think the argument was that because, I'm going to try and get this right. Whereas when you have horses who are in livery, for example, and they go out together and then they come in and then they're in their stables and then they go out again. When they're on a track, or in this person's opinion, when they're on a track, taking a herd member away is really stressful for those horses because they're in that environment all the time. So it's like a closed herd almost, which I understand of like introducing horses, but I was like, well, how does that work if you've got like 6 owners on a track? Anyway, that was what I read.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I want to say that in my work, I really do talk about stress a lot. And I talk about how to deal with stress, how to understand stress in horses, how to understand what's happening at the time, what stresses them out, and how to handle that in the moment. But I feel like that stress, even, taking a herd member away, is also a form of stress, isn't it? And I feel like that gets a really bad name because we cannot, what we do if we stop our horses from having stressful experiences is that window of tolerance and resilience and tolerance towards stress just becomes smaller and smaller. And what you really want is a horse that is more resilient, where the window becomes wider. So avoiding something in order to avoid stress, so not going out on a hack or not taking a horse off a track in order to avoid them having a stressful experience, I think is problematic, because then that means that in the holistic sense, you haven't understood how that feeds into your horse's welfare in a bad way, because it might make the experiences more stressful until they cannot be taken out anymore. So I find that interesting. Mine differs in a way. I would just say I let them be horses. I don't ride in a competitive way, which means my horses are leisure horses. They get to enjoy the life outside. They get rugs on and they get good food and all of that. But I let them be horses. They have access to a stable. They can go in and out as they please. And I trust that they will be able to make that judgment for themselves, which is, I think, something that many owners struggle with, is to let go of that control, let go of this idea that you have to keep it all together for them because they're so delicate and cannot handle it. I let them be horses. If they want to run, they run. If they, injure themselves because they gallop through the forest and forgot to think about the tree that was in the way, then that sucks, but I deal with that and they will not do it again. I trust that too. And you'd be surprised. Rubio, my little Spanish cruzado, he actually does canter changes, lead changes around in the forest, and he will do the most beautiful, going onto his haunches and beautiful canter, and you'd be like, what is happening? Because I didn't do that with him. I didn't teach him that. He just does that. But that's because the environment encourages him to become more playful and more bold and more expressive in a way, which then again, when I work with him, and all the others really as well, but when you then work with them, they become so much more expressive and autonomous. And I love that in horses. I want them to have a voice and I want to hear what they have to say. And if they say no, then that might still mean I ask again and again. And I ask like 3 times. And if they still say, no, I don't want to, I can't, fine, we don't do that. We do something else. But I think it's a conversation to be had, right? And I think that really is encouraged by that environment that supports horses being horses.
Yeah, that is so interesting to hear you say that you do ask the same question multiple times. And this is something that I struggle with Blondie. She is pretty strong with what she has to say. And so things like I do find like she has very negative associations to tack previously. And so it's interesting to hear you say that actually you ask the same question multiple times to see whether you get the same answer, because I have found that with her. Sometimes I'll go to her with the saddle pad, like the bareback pad, for example, because I don't actually have a saddle for her yet. She's changed shape so much since the PSD and the rehab and the da-da-da-da. It just hasn't been the right thing for her to have a saddle. And I'll go to her with it and she'll be like, no way. And then I'll retreat and I'll say, I hear you. And then I go back and she'll go, And there have been times previously where I've gone, okay, I'm not going to ask you again. And actually, the times often when I say, okay, I respect your no, but can you try? And she goes, actually, yeah, I can. And it's so good I feel validated in that moment, because when a horse says, stick it, it can feel very difficult when you feel like, I do a lot of things for her body. Like, we've done a lot of veterinary stuff, we've done a lot of bodywork stuff, foot stuff, gut stuff, PSSM stuff, energetic work from a distance stuff. I'm like, are we getting somewhere? Is this still just a pattern? And maybe you have some advice for me, which would be cool to hear in those moments. But yeah, that was just a really interesting reflection.
That sounds so real. Thank you for sharing that, because I feel like that is the reality of what a lot of horse owners or horse people experience. They are in those situations, and it is difficult to find that balance. And I feel like, it sounds so cliche, but I want to say, like, trust your gut. If you know what her no, I'm in pain looks like, and you know what her I'm uncomfortable in this situation because it's new looks like, that is a very different no, right? The one might be, I can't because I'm hurting, and the other one might be, can you explain it a bit better so I might be able to do it, And I feel like so often when people start listening to their horses more and they get that pushback and they get that no, I feel like it's very disheartening. Like you said, it's difficult. And often what I find is that the balance or the pendulum almost swings to the other side, to this, my horse says no all the time and I'm not doing anything with them anymore. When in fact, you want to be somewhere in the middle. Like, life is not black or white, it's a grayscale. And the same goes for that work with the horses. You want to be in balance, but it's different depending on the context again. So if you know what your horse's yeses look like, a wholehearted yes, or a yes, I'm unsure, but no, but yes, that also makes a difference. So just the nuance of it in the end is so important.
You raise a really interesting point, and I had a bit of a mental image when you said it about the more you converse with your horse, the more conversations you will have. And I was thinking about, the asking 3 times, and I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I wonder what would make a horse say yes in 1 second, but no in the second before. And I was thinking, I wonder if, it's not necessarily the question you're asking. It's like, I can't answer that now because I'm actually distracted by the woman over there who's bringing food to the yard or whatever. And sometimes I wonder whether, when you say, people are getting stuck with a horse that doesn't want to do anything ever, and this is not me making excuses, I think we should absolutely respect a no, but sometimes I wonder if they're misinterpreting their horse's behaviour, and that actually, if we did a bit more liberty with our horses, for example, and there was more chances for a conversation, we would start to learn their language a bit more and understand that, he's saying no there not because he doesn't want to answer your question, but because actually he's like, I'm just going to take a moment to listen to that thing that I heard over there, and then I'll be right back with you, It's a really interesting point.
Yeah, that is, such a great addition to it, because those conversations, I want to touch on that if I can, because those conversations cannot really happen if your horse is fully tacked up and you have like all the equipment in the world on them, because they will have associations with that equipment already, and they will not express as freely if they have that equipment on already, unless they have learned that. But very likely they have learned to go with the flow and just do it, whatever, without judgment. But take it all off, like strip it all back to the bare basics. Put your horse and yourself in an arena or a round pen or whatever you have, and just see what happens. I mean, that is going to tell you a lot about all those associations as well. So I love that you just said that, the liberty work. Yes, very much so.
100%. And this was absolutely what I did with Blondie. I was like, this relationship is broken still. I rode her, we did some stuff, but there was still pain in the body, there was still complicated emotions. And so I went, okay, what happens if I don't tell you that you have to stay with me? What if I say, we'll go to the arena together, but you can, like, there had to be some boundary, because my life at this point in time is not just totally free range. Can't just let her be anywhere. So we went to the arena and we took everything off, and she was like, absolutely not. I don't want to have anything to do with you. I'm going to run around. I'm going to be really stressed. I don't want to be in your space. And actually, I've changed, with the move happening, and with all of the nervous system regulation stuff that I have done over the last year with Bev, the somatic therapist I've been working with, I'm a very different person energetically to the person who I was a year ago. And now I let Blondie go free in the arena, and I posted some little tiny clips on my Instagram story a couple of days ago, and she's there like, please, may I interact with you? Let's do something together. She kind of goes to the gate, because the arena's in a bad place at our current arena, because it's like a bit away from the yard, so it's that like element of stress. There is an element of stress with being on their own down there. She kind of goes, she checks in, and then she comes back to me, and we interact and we move together. And then and there's none of this like big loud screaming that she used to do. And it's amazing to hear you say that, because I can 100%, if you guys are like, oh, I don't know if that's the right thing to do, like, if you can put yourself into a safe environment, I think that's important to remember, like a round pen or a smaller arena, or somewhere where your horse isn't going to put themselves into a dangerous situation. And actually, you could do it on a line initially, if you were like, I don't know how this is going to go, but you do it with like some freedom, right? You kind of don't have too many like structured ideas of how you're going to do it, and see what happens. What does your horse tell you? Oh, I just love this. I'm so excited by this conversation. This is everything to me. I feel like, yeah, I love it. Makes me all warm and fuzzy inside. Aww. But I wanted to ask you a question about riding, because you said that you do ride, but you would call yourself a leisure rider as such. And my relationship with competition has changed exponentially over the years. I do like going out and experiencing things with my horses, and being, able to showcase progression, I suppose I would call it. But what is your take on competition and horses, and that sort of that connection that I think we can feel? I don't know, there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment that I would like to talk about around, the FEI and all sorts of things like that, and it's complicated, isn't it? So, do you have any thoughts, feelings, talking points? Did you know that when your horse's digestive system is inflamed or uncomfortable, they may become less able to use their bodies freely, and over time this could contribute to a general lack of soundness. Whole body soundness, like we've been talking about with Steffi. There are lots of possible triggers for a gut imbalance, and a worm burden is most certainly one of them. Most worms live in the gut for part of their life cycle, and parasite infestations can damage the gut wall, cause inflammation, and affect how nutrients are absorbed. No matter the size, breed, or workload of a horse, all equines are at risk of internal parasites, but gone are the days of irresponsibly and blindly blanket worming. For smarter, more sustainable parasite management, put your horse first and make worm egg counts an essential part of your horse's care routine. Targeted parasite control tells you when and if your horse really needs worming, which reduces unnecessary medication, protects gut health, and helps to slow resistance to wormers. Fewer wormers means less disruption to the gut and contributes to a healthier, happy horse who will feel and move their best. Westgate Labs will support you with their award-winning tests and advice and ensure that your worm control plan is the best it can be to support overall well-being and health. Use the discount code EQLive10 for 10% off Westgate test kits apart from Equisal and subscriptions, and get results you can trust to protect your horse. Head to www.westgatelabs.co.uk for more information.
So many, I suppose. I mean, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts around what's going on. I don't come from a competitive background. I have been on a competition or 2 or 3, like over the span of 2 years, I've competed a little bit. But I used to do that with gaited horses, so it's a very different world. Still, I didn't like it back then, and that was, I think, 2009, 2010, so that's ages ago. Because it really hasn't changed much. There is a lot of inside stuff going on, and you kind of know already what's going to happen in many ways. And I feel like, especially with what you've just said with the FEI and the rule change that's been going on, and I think everybody's seen this horrific video of the rider on the draw reins. Oh, you haven't seen that, or have you seen that?
I've definitely seen it, and actually I posted a video yesterday of me riding around my lovely horse with its nice soft neck and a bitless bridle. And I'm not saying that you can't ride with a bit and be kind. I'm not saying that by any stretch, but yeah, there's a wild world out there. Can you touch a bit on the new, what your understanding of the new FEI? Because the FEI ruling has basically changed recently. I'll just explain it in case somebody else hasn't heard what's happened. But there used to be a zero tolerance policy for blood in competitive sport at any level, at FEI level. And what that meant was, if a horse came out of the ring and they were in the warm-up and there was any drop of blood on them, a nosebleed, a scratch on their leg, get caught on itself. Oh yes, yeah. At any point during any of it, there was instant disqualification. There was no exemption. That was the end of that. Whereas now, there has been a change to the ruling, and actually, I think it would be good to get it up. The new rules will place an onus on the veterinarians to determine the severity of the lesions that lead to visible blood before deciding whether to permit a horse to compete, in comparison to current rules which place a blanket prohibition. So meaning that now it's kind of open to discretion. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
I think it's horrific. I think it's absolutely appalling. I think as a sentient being, understanding horses, being sentient beings, it is absolutely out of this world to think of even changing something like that into what it has become now. I mean, alone the fact that we have to even talk about it, and it's not being a clear, this is absolutely not okay whatsoever. There are no excuses. So that's kind of my stand. I find that very problematic because it depicts a really dangerous picture. And I felt like there was, or I still feel like there is a lot of change in the equine world. I feel like people are trying to move into the direction that is more equicentric, like horse-centric. And I feel like what the FEI does with that rule change is bringing it back more towards the ego of the human being rather than, what does the horse need and what it actually is about. It should be, even if it's a competition, it should be with the horse and human as a pair, as showing that connection, showing that we can work together even if we are horse and human, even though we should be able to find that fine, nuanced language together. And that rule just basically shits all over that. It's just no better way to put it.
I totally agree. I think the discourse that I saw around blood from the reason that the rule change happened was, sometimes it's just a tiny bit and it's a complete accident and then you've ruined someone's whole competition. And the counter argument to that, which is really nice actually, I've seen it's not nice, but in this context it's nice to see this counter argument of people saying it takes a lot to draw blood Like it takes a lot to do that. And I think the problem, to your point, is that if you're saying that you value that competitor's experience not being ruined, in air quotes, more than you value understanding and taking a stand against that horse having blood, it's really puts a line in the sand that you are placing that above the welfare of the horse. I just think any normal competitor, even if you'd done it accidentally, you would be horrified. Even if your horse had just caught themselves with their foot and there was blood and they came up to you and said, I'm so sorry, that's disqualification, you'd be like, fair enough, we'll come back another day. And that says so much, if I'm being bold, about the FEI's relationship with the top of the sport, which is that it is actually not about the horse. And they have made that quite clear with quite a few of the decisions they've made over the last few years.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I think the thing that I come back to, if you had Usain Bolt and every time he ran the 100 metres he got a serious nosebleed, it would just not carry on. There would be and it's like, why do we need to change this rule? Where did this come from? What part of our requirement to have horses at the highest level of sport, where did we lose track, like you say, of why we do this? Because why do we do it? Because is it for financial gain? And I know, of course, people make their livelihood from riding horses at a high level, and that's complicated. Here's a question to maybe lighten this, and I have my own thoughts about this, because I have seen amazing horse people do amazing things at an amazing level. But do you believe it is possible to train horses to the highest level without fear or force?
Yeah. I mean, define fear and define force, because I think everybody has a very different understanding of that. Not whipping horses into shape, I absolutely believe that's possible. I've seen people do it. I've seen people do incredible things, training horses to incredibly high levels just with positive reinforcement. I've seen that happen. So, but it takes time. And I think especially in the sport, time is often not on people's sides, or the horses' sides rather. So they have to be, I want to rephrase that, because they don't have to be pushed into those shapes and into doing things, but it's almost like the people are forced to do that, and therefore the horses have to go through with it. But that tells us so much about the whole system and how broken it is and where it needs change. But change is uncomfortable.
I agree. I also think it's not an elephant in the room because it's not that dramatic, but I also think it's very easy for everyday riders like myself, and to an extent, I guess, Miri, in the sense that you're not putting yourself in that position of saying, well, that's the top of the sport. The top of the sport is abhorrent on the whole, and they shouldn't do this and they shouldn't do that. But actually, a lot of us compete our horses at low levels. And I was going to ask you whether because you said you don't, you have competed, but you don't now. And Miri mentioned that she likes competing as a point of like, how far are we in our progress? Do you think there's any ethical way to compete a horse that allows the rider or acknowledges that the rider enjoys competition and enjoys the not just progression with their horse and being out with their horse and the relationship, which is all lovely things, but actually genuinely enjoys competing against others and essentially, if we're being really honest, using an animal to do that? It's a pointy question, but...
Yeah, I mean, there are so many aspects in that question, but I think also that is possible, because at the end of the day, if you're a heart-led kind of person, if you're a compassionate person, if you care about your horse's well-being, then you wouldn't compete them on a day where you felt like they were off a little bit, be it they're too stressed and they just keep yanking the head up and they can't do it. What I would love to see is for a person to then get off and say, I'm sorry, this is not the day where I can go through with this with my horse without damaging our relationship in a way. that would be so powerful to see that happen. But people don't do that, because everybody expects the horse to just go through with it. But I feel like if we were to be setting those sort of examples, people would feel more empowered to take a stand as well, and to just have the horse at the center of that conversation, not think about the person. And it's okay if that sucks, it's okay if you then get off and you're totally frustrated with yourself and the world on that day. That's fine also. That's a human experience to be had. But again, it's a possibility of being a teaching moment for you, teaching you about your own resilience towards stress and towards expectations maybe. And, there are so many angles we could look at this from that don't force you into a position where you have to go over what's good for your horse or what's good for yourself. So I feel like, yes, it is possible, but I would love to see more people doing that and then actually saying, today's not the day. Or if they go through with it, do it in a nice way, even if it doesn't give you the points because the judges want to see different things. Go through with it, but show a positive example. Show the world that it is possible, because we do need that. Otherwise, we will never do that change. We'll never get that to flip over.
100%. I think there's something to be really said. I have ridden horses that love to do the thing that you are doing with them. My mare, Mo, who is retired now, she's 21, I think. I think she loved to jump jumps more than I did. And I remember we went to Arena UK, which is like actually where you are this weekend, Rhi. And I was jumping a 140. So that's big jumps, right? And I was so nervous. Yeah, really big. And I was really, really nervous. It was the qualifier for the Grand Prix. So like the qualifier for the biggest class that they ran. Okay. And this was my first 140. It was kind of like the deep end, if ever you heard it. And it was when I trained with Tim Stockdale and he was there and he was guiding me and he was like, you are fine, you are competent at this level. But I was really, really nervous. And I remember, I've got the video, she took me around that course of fences. Like, of course, there was an element of me steering and holding and doing all of the right things at the right moment. But there was something about the way that she was like, yes. She wholeheartedly said, I've got you, you've got me, let's do this. And I know that this is a thing. Exactly, right? I feel emotional saying it myself because this is a thing that does happen. And it reminds me that it is possible to do this at a high level. She didn't wear shoes. She lived in the field all the time. She was fit and strong and happy and positive. And people used to be like, oh my God, that girl's got no shoes, no horse. What a weirdo. I'm there with my little old Cavallo boots, taking them on and off in the car park across the stones because she didn't like the rubbish car park that they had. And it does remind me, and it is important, I think, when there's so much darkness and there's people riding, like you say, in a warm-up. He's an Olympian, this guy. It's very public, this video. I'm not bad-mouthing somebody because he's essentially doing it in public. He's not even got reins on his bridle. He's just got draw reins. And then he comes back down to the trot and the horse is actively quite lame. And he's in a warm-up at a major show. If this is what is happening... This is what I think when I see that, is this is what is happening in public. We have to think about what is happening in private, right? And there will be certain horses that these people come across, these top riders, that will love it like Mo loved it. And they will want to do the job and they will take them in the ring and they will say, yes, I want to do this. But they are fewer. There are less, I suppose. Anyway, I don't know where that was necessarily going. It feels like a tangent, but it was... When you were talking about that, like, is it possible? It felt like a relevant story to tell.
No, absolutely. And I think you're right. I think we can tell the things that our horses love to do. And I think that's a really important thing to recognise, is that you can use pressure and force and fear to make a horse do something, or you can also rely on the fact that they really enjoy the thing that they do. And what is really important is that in both of those scenarios, we don't take advantage of that horse's willingness or enjoyment of something to just keep going. We all know ponies that would, when we were younger, had just kept going, kept cantering, kept, you know, galloping across the field and jumping all the jumps and da-da-da, when those ponies really should have had a walk or stopped or ended the day. And I think that's where it's important as the rider to have that conversation with our horses and say, I'm just going to step in as your advocate here and just, you know, and just be like, that's enough. Because I think we have seen that at the top of sport sometimes as well, where a horse has kept going because they've been asked to, because they love the job, because they understand what's being asked, when actually that rider really should have, you know, pulled up or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like you are the voice for your horse, really. And you have, I mean, I see that as part of the mission, actually, of what I do, is becoming a voice for horses, not in a like, oh, I talk to horses way. Yes, but, and also really being the advocate for horses, translating what you see into a language that people understand, helping them understand to an extent so they have the knowledge and the abilities to then deal with those situations in a way that helps the horse, actually. So I love what you just said, yeah. And also your story, Miri, because I do absolutely think that there are horses who enjoy what they're doing, and she would probably continue to do it if you'd let her, you know.
Absolutely. And like, I remember I've told this story before, but Zora spoke to my friend Eleanor, who is a communicator, and she said, I love getting dressed up with Miriam. I love when she puts my shiny bridle on. And she has a specifically shiny bridle. It has a patent noseband and, you know, diamante brow band, and it is her shiny bridle. And she says, I love it when she does my hair and she takes me dancing. And like, we've done dressage to music. Like, these are such specific things. And I think it reminds me that it's possible, and it reminds me that it's joyful, because that communication between horse and rider, if it's built on trust and love, then yeah, they want to do fun stuff with us. They used to want to just take us from A to B across the steppe in Mongolia, but now, you know, yes, they will take you to Berry Farm and let you do an elementary, and they dance around to the music and have a lovely time.
And people can see that. People can absolutely see the difference in a horse-rider combination that have worked with the love and the compassion and that joy. And that's, I feel like, what we need to see more of in order to make it more horse-centric again. So 100%.
I think something that I see a lot of, and I'm sure you guys will resonate with this, is often when people post on social media, they'll post something like, I saw a really stressed horse yesterday. It was with a Western rider, and it had this big bit of headgear on, and it was like strapped and a big bit, and it looked really traumatized. This horse was like dancing around and rearing on the spot and all of these things. And her caption for the video was, oh, the TikTok trainers are going to love this one. And there's this part of me, exactly, there's this part of me that makes me go like, you know that it's wrong. You know there's something wrong, and that is why you know that people are going to come for you, because you know that the horse is displaying something that is not calm and soft and happy, and yet you're there like just like gaslighting people to be like.
But there's also a massive ego in that statement, in being like, I've got my horse doing exactly what I want them to do, and I'm in control, not like these pansies. That is the undercurrent of that statement, which is even worse, actually. Because, you know, that's saying you know that it's wrong, and you also know that you're doing it from a really oppressive and quite actually disgusting place. And like, what does that say about you as a person? That's how I feel.
Yeah. We've really got into it today, haven't we, guys? Goodness.
It is a broad spectrum topic, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah. And actually, you know what? This comes to a really good place, and a question I really wanted to get into the topic of nervous system regulation, because I know that you do talk about this, Steffi, in some of your like your social posts and that kind of thing. Can you talk to us a bit about, well, yeah, what you've learned about nervous system regulation and kind of how that impacts our relationship with our horses?
I love those questions. They're like, I could say so much, but
Please do. That's why you're here.
Thank you. What have I learned? I have learned that behavior is always, I mean, it's so obvious when I say it, but I have learned that behavior is only ever the surface of something that goes on deeper beneath the surface, and it's only ever communication. And that is something that we do learn, I understand. We learn that behavior is communication, but to understand the nuance of what lies beneath that behavior, I feel I have only realized to the level that I have realized it now, and probably still haven't finished realizing, is it comes down to that. So it comes down to the nervous system, to what a horse experiences, how they experience it, how they've been raised, how they grow up, what sort of positive and negative experiences they make throughout their lives, how they're being trained, how the person has access to the horse and the horse's way of acting and reacting, and how they understand it, how that reciprocity basically shows up in those everyday situations. You know, all of that will be affected or will affect the nervous system in a way, and more, and beyond that. So just understanding that behavior is only ever the surface level of what goes on beneath that surface in your horse, I think that is the most profound takeaway. The easiest, but also the most complex takeaway, I suppose, in a way. Because it's never the same thing for all horses. You know, one horse might spook to something because of being stressed about it. The other horse might feel more curious about it. And to understand the nuance and the depth of that nuance is super fascinating. But yeah, I guess I could go on, but that's probably that.
And in terms of how, I actually think I was interested in your take on human nervous system regulation in regards to a bit the conversation that we've just had. Can you touch a bit on what you've learned about the importance of that?
So I feel like, hot take, hot take. I feel like a lot of people aren't really in contact with themselves, like in connection with themselves. And I feel like that shows heavily in those sort of situations where social pressure plays in. So it probably starts somewhere in kindergarten, in school, and you're taught to do certain things a certain way. You get taught to not be yourself. You get taught to forget your own opinions, and you know, and depending on how resilient you are, and how much you stand firm, even though people are telling you to stop doing things a certain way or do in a different way. Depending on that, I feel like we develop a certain way. And then, I mean, it's so much more complex, and it's not just the nervous system. There's obviously the brain and the body and everything. But I feel like people who don't really have that sort of resilience towards that social pressure struggle a lot in those moments. And it comes down to certain types of reactions that we see from them. So, for example, I think we all remember when this horse was beaten in, I think it was also Olympics, and she was doing like the
pentathlon.
I didn't know that word. So that we saw her doing what the trainer was shouting to her, even though I'm 100% sure that woman sitting on top of that horse knew that it was wrong to hit the horse, yet the trainer shouted, hit him. And she was smacking the horse, you know. And I think that sort of situation tells you a lot about what's going on in a person. So I can only presume that it might be a fight reaction, it might be a flight reaction, even it might be even a fawn reaction towards what was going on. But there's always a deeper sort of undercurrent for that sort of behavior. And I don't think that, I do want to believe that people are good at their core. I don't believe that people are bad and want to hurt horses. I mean, with this rule change, I don't know anymore, but, you know, I do still want to believe that people are good at their core. And I do want to believe that they don't do these sort of things on purpose. So what you see usually is if a horse starts to act up, refuse, whatever, and people reacting in this angry sort of way, then that is a trigger for them, and that triggers this response for them, and it's actually a survival response. It's a I want to stay safe and alive in this moment response, and it feels kind of weird thinking about it that way, but it allows me to look at it with more compassion and understand humans a little bit better, I suppose.
100%. And I think one of the things I heard in that, when you said, you know, you don't think that people like want to be horrible, and I agree, but I think that what happens, you know, you said like people are, you think that sometimes people aren't really connected to themselves, and so when we aren't connected to ourselves, we can't then really be connected to our feelings, and then when we're not really connected to our feelings, what we do to an animal doesn't really like come into it, because there's this disconnection between self, and so because there's the disconnection with self, there is also the disconnection between towards others. You might remember Quaker, the household cavalry horse who was seen running terrified through London earlier this year after a construction accident. It was heartbreaking to watch. Quaker's body was badly injured and needed time and help to heal, but thanks to donations from people like you, the first phase of the Horse Trust's new land was ready when he needed it most. He was able to rest, heal, and just be a horse again. This Christmas will be his first peaceful one in retirement, the kind every horse deserves. And to finish building this sanctuary for Quaker and others like him, the Horse Trust needs one last fundraising push: fencing, shelters, and water troughs for the final 3 fields. If you'd like to help, visit thehorsetrust.org.uk. Just £22 can help with the fencing, £50 helps fund water troughs, and £150 helps provide a shelter. Imagine Quaker spending his first Christmas in the peaceful Chilterns pastures, away from all the hustle and bustle. That's what this appeal makes possible.
I would also, I think, be a little bit harder on people than you have when you say a horse refuses and that person is afraid and they have fear of their life. I actually don't necessarily. I think there are scenarios where fear absolutely plays a role in somebody's behaviour. I've been there. But I also think, having been on my own journey of like working with a coach, specifically around mindset, is like what we attach to the horse's behaviour is like what it says about us. And a lot of people worried about what other people think. And I'm sure in that moment, that pentathlon athlete was thinking, oh my God, I've literally got to the Olympics. I can't get the horse to do something. I look weak. I look like a bad athlete. People are going to think X, Y, Z. And that pressure, my coach will think, made her behave in the way that she did. So I think also, having been on my own journey of unpacking what does it mean when this happens, and being able to separate the emotion from it and be like, actually, this is nothing to do with me and it's just training, is a very powerful thing. So I think don't cop yourself out of just being like, oh, well, it's just because I'm afraid. Is it? Or is it because it says something about you as a rider and a person? And maybe just pull on that thread gently. But, you know, I've been there and I've done it. And it's true.
So interesting, and I'm going to counter you again, because for me it has never been about what other people think. It is always about fear. If ever I have been too quick with a horse or too tough or whatever, it is fear every single time. Fear of them going over the top of me, fear of whatever it might be. And I just think there's so many dynamics to this, and I am a fearful person, definitely. I live with chronic anxiety that I'm working on, and I definitely think I have grown up a very dysregulated child. I the more I've learned, I think I've been, you know, Nikki said it, didn't she, on our call with her? She said, you know, sounds like, you know, you've had a dysregulated nervous system for a very long time. So for me, you know, fear comes and then a reaction, a response takes place, and that's my go-to, and that's my learning. Isn't it so interesting? Like for you, it's, oh my God, what do people think? What do people think?
Yeah.
And for me,
it's so true.
Oh my God, I'm scared.
Well, it's a reflection of who we are as people. I'm quite pleased to say that I've worked on external validation issues that I've had, not issues, but you know, that for a really long time. And when I was younger, it was a really big problem for me and something I found really hard. So it was no surprise that when it came to the horses, I was worried about what others would think. For you, you know, knowing that you were a fearful person growing up, who we are as people at our core doesn't change when we start working with horses. It just heightens it. So
yeah, it's that reflection.
Can I add something here?
Please.
I think that was so profound. Like, your experience is different from your experience. And I think that is really painting a picture, because it's going to be different for everyone. And I feel like we're giving humans too much credit sometimes, because that sounds harsh, but what I mean is some of these processes happen unconsciously, and there is no way of consciously understanding what's going on in a certain moment if you're already flooded with stress hormones. And, you know, the second it kicks in, then you understand what's going on. And in that second, you might already have hit a horse and you didn't want to do that. And then other things are more conscious. So understanding your responses, for example, I think fawning is the classic that a lot of people do. So the people pleasing, not wanting to get into arguments, things like that. So reacting in a way that keeps the social dynamics safe and stable around you is an actual survival mechanism. And it sounds more harsh, I suppose, or it sounds more as if survival has to be you're in actual danger. But often we don't understand what our body already perceives to be a dangerous or threatening situation. And that awareness, again, has to come into play. And then the more we understand, the more we become aware of those processes in us and in our horses, the more we can find and build a bridge that builds on overall soundness instead of fear and lack and all of that other stuff. So, yeah. Not saying hitting horses is okay, by the way. Anyone out there, don't hit horses. Absolutely never do that. But there is a kind of psychological aspect and biological aspect behind that, I think.
Well, I mean, and I think that's very difficult, isn't it? Of course, we don't condone doing that. But, you know, there is a time when a horse smacks you in the head with their bridle on because they're not quite paying attention, or you're in the wrong place. And it is quite hard not to be like, because your inherent, you know, your natural instinct is to kind of push whatever it was that has just banged your very important brain. It's very hard to not be like, don't do that. You know, there have been instances where I've definitely made that mistake and gone, and then gone, why did I do that? I wish I hadn't done that. Because the horse looks at you. And horses are remarkably tolerant. And if you have made that mistake, and you have, as I have done, I will hold my hands up and say that I have reacted in that initial moment. You know, that happens. It just happens.
Everyone. Yeah.
Right. It is, you know, let yourself off the hook. But it's so good to hear that actually there is a psychological thing that is taking place in that moment where it isn't out of... I mean, is it out of your control? Is it possible to get to a point where that isn't our natural reaction, where we are super tolerant? Because I know when I feel more regulated, I definitely, if a horse is more spooky around me and I'm more regulated, I'm way more tolerant of what would probably be deemed to be quite a dangerous situation for most average people. I'm dealing with very dysregulated horses a lot of the time. But yeah, is there a way that we can get to a place where being bumped on the head doesn't affect us?
I guess give yourself time to put that time and space between yourself and between the stimulus and the response. In that case, between your horse and yourself, for example. So the thing is, the initial reaction of doing this is a fight response, technically speaking. Even though you might not see it as I want to hit back, it's a reflex, right? But it's your body looking after yourself.
Just for the people who can't see what Steffi was doing, she's just putting her hand above her head very quickly, as if she's reacting to a horse who's gotten too close, when she's saying about the fight response.
Yes. And that is really difficult to sort of break up, I guess, in the habit, or not a habit, it's a reflex. So give yourself some time and some space. Put some distance between yourself and your horse in that moment. And if you notice, for example, I think a classic example is riding in the arena or even on a hack, it doesn't matter, but just riding, and your horse sees something and they start to tense up, and then they stop and they get really bulgy eyes, bulgy lower neck, and the head is like super high. That's a freeze response. Your horse is looking at whatever the thing is that might be eating them in a second. And instead of whipping them forward, give them a second to look at it. Then some horses might spin, some horses might just walk ahead. You know your horse best, you know what reaction to expect. If you know they're going to spin around with you on top, then you can prepare for that, or you get off, depending on what's safer in that moment. So in those sort of situations, we have a choice. We can think about what's going on. I feel like it's much more difficult when it affects ourselves, because you have to do the work on yourself and understand what's going on at a deeper level, your responses, your behaviors, even the way you act in the world. You have to understand more about yourself in order to understand, oh, this is what I'm going to do next, most likely. And I think it takes an incredible level of I don't want to say self-control, because that's not what I want to say, but self-awareness, and then also the ability to, and I take a deep breath, and then I'm going to try and do something else for a second, and if it is agitating you, if you're sitting on your horse and you understand what's going on for them, but it still might anger you because you want to do something, or it might make you feel frustrated or even helpless. Any of those emotions are okay. It's just the question of how do we act upon them. And nobody's ever always regulated. Like that's a lie. And that would be unhealthy, quite frankly. Emotions are good. They are energy in motion. They move us away or towards something. And understanding that, I think, is so helpful in order to make better choices, make choices that are supportive of your horse, of yourself, and also of that relationship.
Did you just say that an emotion is energy in motion?
Yes. Mind
I
blown.
Yeah, like
Really?
wow. I've just never heard it explained
Yeah.
like that, and I think that's very helpful.
But you're
Oh,
like, yeah, that makes
Steffi.
sense. That's what I feel.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. We've been talking a lot of things, and I have a closing tradition on this podcast, and no doubt, as you are a listener of the podcast, you will know the question that is coming. But if you had one thing that you could say to every equestrian and they had to listen, what would you say?
Ooh. Wow.
Take your time. You're okay.
They have to listen. They have to listen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I would say listen to your horse. And by that, I mean, listen to what they're saying and trust that what they're saying is true for them in that moment. No horse is acting out, air quotes. No horse is misbehaving, air quotes, on purpose. It's only ever a response to what's going on for them. And the deeper you understand your horse and their emotions and everything that's going on for them in their lives, the deeper your relationship with them can become, and the more amazing things you can do with them. But that all depends on you trusting them, that what they say is true for them.
Thank you. It's become a wonderfully common response to say, listen to your horse. And I think it's very meaningful of this podcast that is the kind of the overarching theme that is coming up. And it's lovely because people often say listen to your horse, but then what they follow with differs repeatedly.
Yes.
And I think that's what, listening to our horses, what does that really mean? What does that mean to each individual person? And to hear your take on that, Steffi, and your take on everything that we've discussed today has been a real privilege. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely.
Yeah, it's been great.
Steffi, can you tell us a little bit about how people can find you? I know that you have got some courses and, things that people can do. So if you could, maybe tell people the best place to find you. We'll put all of this information in the show notes too, but it's always nice to have it spoken from the horse's mouth as such.
Yeah, sure. So best place to find me is either on Instagram, but also do check out the website, scienceforsoundness.com. I do have a little tiny space on the interweb with the Holistic Horsemanship Academy, which is my attempt of bringing that sort of education and understanding and that depth to the horse world and to horse owners or people who just enjoy horses in their lives in whatever capacity, to have that sort of nuanced understanding of them and to find connection and to understand a little bit more about what goes on beneath the surface. So if people feel like that sounds interesting, then the website is probably the best place to start, and then just click yourself through and take it from there.
Wonderful. Thank
Love
you
it.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Steffi, thank you so much for joining us. Team on the call, friends and listeners, we will see you next week. I think we're coming to the end of season 4 now, but we'll be seeing you right through to Christmas Eve, actually, because we're going to do a bonus episode. I don't know if we've said that before, but we have now. So we will see you next Wednesday. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Bye.